Now, the violence we witnessed in Lansing, Michigan yesterday is far from the first time union bullies have turned vicious in the wake of a decisive defeat by Republicans. And coincidentally, these left-wing forces have come out swinging stronger than ever under President Obama's watch. Now, it's kind of ironic considering it was the anointed one himself who urged, quote, a more civil and honest public discourse. Let's take a look at some of the left's greatest hits from recent years.
Every once in a while, you got to get out on the streets and get a little bloody when necessary.
You will. Hey, calm down. You better get away from me. You better get away from me. I better get away. Camera out of my face. Camera out of my face.
You know what? Everybody here's got to vote. If we go back and we keep the eye on the prize, let's take these out and give America back to America where we belong.
Scott Walker, we send you back to Wisconsin as David did Goliath. We cut your head off and go back into town singing a new song.
I got a message for him to bully Scott Walker and all these bully governors across the country. We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't pick this fight. But if it's a fight you want, it's a fight you're going to get. Knuckle up. Knuckle out! Knuckle out! We're in it to win it!
And joining me now to help us walk through these embarrassing left-wing instances, our syndicated columnist, author, Michelle Malkin is back with us. Michelle, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Sean.
All right, your new website, Twitchy, you really are keeping the left honest, and you're calling them out for the extreme rhetoric they have. In the case of Governor Snyder and this new legislation, there are calls for him to die a painful death, and it goes on. Threats to his family appears. This is now a pattern, as we've been pointing out throughout the evening tonight. Why don't you tell us what you found?
It is, and both at Twitchy and my regular column and the work that I've done over the last 20 years has exposed the bully tactics of intimidation and physical violence and threats by these big labor organizations that have long posed as the champions of the working class. And what you have with Barack Obama and the union violence in the age of Obama is this ugly alliance of people who pretend to be the arbiters of honest and civil discourse while they turn around and then incite violence and hatred against their political enemies in a very literally bloody way. And the clips that you just played are really the tip of the iceberg. And I think what's most notable about the last 4 years, 5 years in particular, is that we're not just talking about your rank and file union members taken off the street. In fact, it's not rank and file union members who agree at all. Many of them abhor what their bosses are doing and what the thug-in-chief represents. And certainly President Obama has egged on many of these big labor organizations. He certainly did on Monday as a precursor to the blood and the consequences that happened before the law was signed, the right to work law. But from May 2010 to the very present, my latest column documents many of these, and what you find is that it's Democratic congressmen like Michael Capuano of Massachusetts, who you showed, telling the labor people to get a little bloody, that it's people like Jimmy Hoffa Jr., who has called for civil war, and Richard Trumka, who gloated about Nancy Pelosi, quote, shoving Obamacare down the throats of Republicans and out their backsides. This is the kind of new tone and civility that Obama represents. And you know what? Once again, silence is complicity, because we haven't heard a word of condemnation from the White House about all of this.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I have a montage. The president often calls for civility, but that's only in the case of the Tucson shooting. I've never seen an instance where he has taken on his own side in a sister soldier moment, as we call it. But he does lecture Republicans, conservatives all the time and the rest of the country about civility. Let me remind people.
I do believe there is hope for civility. I do believe there's hope for progress. I hope that we will continue to engage each other with the spirit of civility and seriousness that has brought us this far.
I still believe that we can act when it's hard. I still believe we can replace acrimony with civility and gridlock with progress. I still believe we can do great things
And Republicans want dirty air and water and kids with autism and Down syndrome to fend for themselves.
Yeah. That's right. And as usual, the White House grants a big permanent waiver, pass, a golden ticket to big labor when it issues all of these lofty edicts about civility and coming together. Of course, big labor has been exempt. I think that we have to have a sense of history and perspective here. Of course, nobody is surprised at the outbreak of violence and fisticuffs that we see in Michigan. I mean, you take somebody like Richard Trumka, and this is a man, of course, who is a very frequent guest of the White House, who has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for the Democrats. Look at his own history. I urge every viewer to Google the name Eddie York and learn the history of Richard Trumka when he was head of the United Mine Workers, and this non-union contractor was shot in the back of the head. He was non-union, and he was shot and targeted because he didn't want to give in to the labor thugs. And in that case, Richard Trumka never had to answer for the consequences, the bloody consequences of that. There were UMW captains who were charged and prosecuted based on that death. But it really goes on and on. You look at the ILWU and the bloody Marxist Harry Bridges, and you look at the SEIU, which has issued manuals that call for many of these community groups to basically demonize and mob scene all of their political opponents. It's par for the course, and the use of the persuasion of power to bring their enemies to their knees. Thank God people in Michigan are standing up and fighting back.
All right, Michelle Malkin, always good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
You bet.